Run DMC for Spam Master D. Run DMC for Spam Master J. Hi friends. So welcome back to the show. My name is Rocky Outcrop. This is Ethereum Technical Analysis. Ethereum versus the US dollar and Ethereum versus the Bitcoin dollar. Now, of course, sorry, just rhyming. It's not a Bitcoin dollar at all. It's a Bitcoin. Yeah, there you go. And what we're going to do is then take a look at this, where the price action has been, where it could be going, yada, yada. And we're also going to take a look at the moving averages today because I didn't do that in yesterday's episode. There's a wee lesson to be had here about moving averages that I want to give people in terms of being able to tie things together. What's missing from a lot of analysis textbooks and lessons and courses and whatever else out there in the world is the idea of being able to actually, tie things together. And while people maybe convince themselves who conduct these lessons that they're actually, delivering that lesson for people properly in a way that's digestible, I actually think that they're probably not really doing a very good job of it because I don't see people talking about it in a useful way for their own psychology when it comes to looking at the charts. And what is the moving average? Well, the moving average is a trend indicator, okay? It shows you where the trend is going. It's not to be looked at in terms of counter trend, really. It helps you decide, when you're going with the trend and looking for supports for moves and retracements against the trend, etc., etc. And what are these things down below? Well, quite often what they could be considered to be would be counter trend. Now, of course, that's not actually I think that's overly reductionist and isn't true to if you just look at it purely from that narrow viewpoint. But it certainly is actually a truism that we should probably take on board and know yourself. So that if you're looking at these sorts of things, you're saying, hey, maybe we'll get supported by the 21 EMA over there on the weekly time frame, which is what I have up right now. For instance, good idea. That's you looking at the weekly trend and all the rest of it. But then you might also be looking down here and saying, well, what if we don't get supported by the weekly trend? What could we be looking at? And for instance, you might look towards the stochastics here and say, well, there's bearish divergence on the weekly there, and that's slightly counter trend. And maybe this is why we've seen this drop off in the price action. And actually, we've seen this drop down by what is that now? 37% from the highs. We called them in there as well. So pats on the backs to everybody who's a Rocky Outcroptician who was able to get these sorts of things. But there's it's more complicated than just that. And overall, you would say as well that we remain in a bullish stance overall in terms of this trend. Now, we are below this moving average that I have on the RSI, for instance, and you could make a couple of little assertions about things if things were to go up and not manage to go in and put in higher highs, perhaps, or if they did, that they came in and it didn't quite, really expand out enough to consider that you were in a sort of upward channel, for instance, here on this thing. And instead, if you saw something like this happen, you might start to think maybe there was a bit of a rising wedge on the go in terms of these oscillators as well. That's something to look for, but let's zoom on in and catch up with where the prices have been recently, having moved down here and got the full measured move off the back of that head and shoulders. So we've come down and we've come in and we've touched in around about the 618 zone, and we've done that a few times over the last few days. Today, we haven't done that quite as yet. Will we go on to do that? Well, looking over at the Bitcoin pricing, and this is a handy way of looking for another corollary in the that's a hard word to say, huh? So looking for another sort of correlatory aspect of something out there in the world, then you could be looking at using that T in there and changing it makes it easier to say, or just simply saying looking for correlation between two sort of friendly assets that you have here, such as Bitcoin and Ethereum. Then you can look at this and say, well, maybe if this pushes on down the way it fills in that CME gap, maybe we'll see further downside on the Ethereum prices too. So that may be something to look out for. And if we do push on past the 618, where could those easy zones be coming in at? Well, the 144 moving average right here at our blue line, which is right on $300, would be obviously quite a significant profit-taking area for people who are short and thinking to themselves, I don't want to be too greedy, but I do want to see a further 10% drop down in the prices from where they are just now. For instance, if people were thinking along those sorts of lines, but then thereafter you could be looking down towards the 786 at $274, or perhaps even the 886 or some other targets even further on down. But that there at $274 being $60 down from where we are now, that's a 20% move after having had a 40% move towards the downside. I don't think we need to go into too much detail in terms of analyzing whether or not that's a possibility. What I would like to say though is, like we already spoke about, we're below the 21 EMA, which is of course a trend indicator, and that when you're below it, when you're above it, as you can see, you're kind of trending towards the upside. Let me just remove all the drawings. Above it, trending towards the upside. Below it, trending towards the downside. Currently below it, and you've got this slope here. There's another lesson for you. Look towards the slopes of the EMAs and the simple moving averages as well. And it's a negative slope like that. As you can see in terms of the broader time frame, you've got this upward slope in 200 simple moving average. And I'll let you draw your own conclusions from that, which comes in at around about $245. And if I put these different things back on, then you can see that we perhaps have another Fibonacci line in there, such as the 886 coming in there at $245 as well. Although, of course, I'm not telling anybody or jabbing anybody with elbows to say where the prices would be going. What instead I would like to look to would be just to give you another sort of idea in terms of if this is a convergent with the trend indicator, and this is a against the trend indicator, if you like to break it down like that. What can you also look at as well? Well, you can put on sort of speculative Fibonacci retracements, and if I just do that real quickly, then you can see with this drawn in wick to wick coming down to the most recent lows there over here on the 5th of September, having been drawn in from the most recent highs on the 1st of September, then if the prices were to actually manage to push up above 351, then you could be going above the 236. So opens and closes above that area would be significant. Now, I think if you were to have been aware of the charts over the last wee while, you might also be feeling that yourself. I've seen this double top coming in here over the last couple of days in at that 350 area, offering up a decent area for people to re-enter on shorts who had maybe perhaps taken profit already down at that 618. And that perhaps explains why then we're looking at a potential Adam and Eve on the go here, and how that also could make of more significance in at this 618 zone, perhaps, if you were to do that. Now, I feel like I'm giving away too much good information on this show yet again, and I have been, threatening to withdraw, some of that because it's just too good. And maybe I'll start up a paid group instead. How about that? But in the meantime, I'm going to just keep going and doing what I'm doing for now anyhow in this episode. But if that was the case and we saw this come into play, then how would that shape up? For instance, if you had a move coming off the back of that going down the way, well, not only does it push past this blue line, but it comes in there at that yellow line, which of course, as a quick reminder, is where the 786 is there. And on the bigger term Fibonacci drawn in on a broader point of view, the 50% area as well. Now, a 60% move off the back of it could take you down to what would be a rather tasty $300 or so move, $300 target, and that 10% move that we're talking about before. Yes, indeed, I am giving away far too much information. I tried to diminish that part of the videos until such times, at least until we get to a significantly higher number of subscribers. And what type of number of subscribers am I looking for, you might be asking? Well, tell your friends, youtube.com/Rocky Outcrop, and stop this from being the best kept secret in crypto technical analysis, because this is, of course, the best technical analysis that's out there that I've heard of, and I think a lot of subscribers would chime in with at least some sort of degree of accordance with that and say, yes, well, maybe it's not the very best, but it's certainly right up there. And at the same time, we're looking at one of the really dinky winky channels here. So let's see if we can get to 2,000 subscribers in the next 2 weeks and get things to sort of line up a little bit more appropriately. And can we get that growth? I would really appreciate it if you were part of that story. Moving on then, let's take a look at Ethereum versus the Bitcoin. And here we are. And is this going to be another head and shoulders which plays out fully, or is it going to fail? When we zoom out a wee bit, you can see that I drew on this head and shoulders. Now, this is strictly speaking not perfect in terms of the patterns for head and shoulders. How about we just dive on over to the pattern site here and get Bulkowski to tell us about the head and shoulders so that we can get a little bit more information while I say that this isn't necessarily perfect in terms of the way that these things work. And generally speaking, what you're looking for with the head and shoulders would be a left shoulder, a head which is higher than the left shoulder, then a right shoulder which is commensurate in terms of its achievement with the left shoulder as well. And looking at this, you can see the overall performance. Well, I read it like it's written phonetically. Is 1 is the best, and it's 9 out of 36. So it's a pretty good formation to be looking to in terms of how these things work. And they do not always have to be perfectly horizontal, although that's what you would be more or less looking for in general, rather than for them to be going slanty-wanty all the way up towards the top. Now, it looks like a perched head and shoulders, or a head perched atop two shoulders. And if I just jump back over to the charts, you can see this being a shoulder, this being a head, and this being a right shoulder doesn't really work. Albeit albeit, by the way, quick tip to everybody who doesn't know how to say that, ALBEIT. Let's just go. This will lose me subscribers if anything. ALBEIT, albeit, is when you is taking these words all B and it and putting them together, creating albeit. Not what some people out there say, albeit. And if you hear someone saying albeit, then, generally speaking, though it's not true completely across the board, but generally speaking, they're probably not who you should be listening to in terms of technical analysis, because if you can't see the pattern in that word, then I doubt you can see the pattern in the charts. So anyway, albeit, this is what we could be looking at in terms of just, the psychology of the market here. And I wanted to draw a point out here about this neckline, and that has indeed been the case. And as you can see over here in the Ethereum USD prices, that we did indeed get the full play out from this thing, which of course is, slightly inaccurate in terms of how it works. Sorry, let's go back. I'll go back to the pitchfork at the end of this episode. But, are we looking here towards these things? And what we have currently is we've seen that we've come down and we've touched this 382 Fibonacci retracement point in here. If I just scroll over to the left, you can see the labels on these things. Now, if we were to go on past these, the two targets towards the lower side would be 0.02 and, of course, 0.02, well, 0.028, 0.025. And what do we have here in terms of divergences or anything else? Well, there isn't really any jumping out at us. This low is indeed lower than this low over here. And if you're looking at this as being some sort of upward trend, then you couldn't really say that while we've had a lower price action move towards the downside, and it's also gone lower on the oscillator over here, that's necessarily bullishly divergent or anything like that in terms of hidden bullish divergence. You could look towards this stochastics and say that between this low and the previous low, if you're looking at this as being a downtrend in terms of stochastics, that this coming not quite as low down there is bullish divergence, but this isn't really been a downtrend since this area over here, so it's a little bit rich to include that in terms of the calculation for this thing. And the downtrend really started over there at the top of that so-called right shoulder. What we'll be looking at instead for things like this at the minute are going to be things like the strength of the trend, which indeed seems to be very much in play at the minute. These things have contracted ever so slightly, but we see that the negative DI remains above that 25 zone or whatever itself, and of course the ADX up there at above 40, and if anything, it's more or less sort of finding its feet at this zone currently, and perhaps we're seeing a failure to recapture this zone over here. And from a Fibonacci perspective, now of course this is just an easy sort of way of summing things up for me that I use on the channel. I'm not Mr. Fibonacci by any means, unlike Fibbo or whatever you call him, that's Tony Vase's pal, who doesn't know how to use them, ironically. But what we see here is that we're just directly below the 236, having managed to fail coming into this area in terms of recapturing it and moving then beyond it, despite the fact that we have actually gone up and at least really properly challenged it. So what you'd want to see is, of course, recapturing this 300 or 0.03352 area properly. We are right in there at the moment doing it just now, but will we get opens and closes above it and push on past it? Now, if we don't, what are we seeing here in this zone here in terms of this 4-hour time frame, where we've got this area and then this area thereafter? If I just jump down a couple instead, maybe it's easier to see the potential for certain things. Now, maybe on this one, it's a little bit more head and shoulders-esque with this movement, although of course it's very much Quasimodo and sloppy. If I go to the 3 hours or the 2 hours, we'll call it, right? What you could look at here is perhaps the potential for an Adam and Eve. Now, Adam and Eve is very similar to the head and shoulders. Let's just actually go on and get Bulkowski, our pal, to explain about Adam and Eve. Matey, cheers. Adam and Eve, not that distinct to the head and shoulders, is of course 10 out of 36, one worse in terms of performance than the head and shoulders. That's because they're pretty much the same pattern, and how it works is pretty much the same sort of a way with a neckline and everything else. Now, have we got an Adam and have we got an Eve on the go over here? Or indeed, is there some other variation of it? And there are very many of them, such as Adam and Adam, Eve and Eve, etc., etc., etc. And what we have here would be more of a sort of an Adam and an Eve, a pattern, I suppose, just in that standard sense, or perhaps an Eve and an Eve, if you want to call it that. Anyway, what you're really looking at is this line here, just below the 236, as being our confirmation for it. And will we see that get challenged over the next wee while? Now, the reason why I'm going on about Ethereum versus Bitcoin so much is because someone did indeed say in the comments, I think in Discord recently, yesterday, that they would like to see more detailed analysis of that. And here we have it at the minute. This is convergent in terms of the downward trend in this high and then this subsequent high, you know, being lower here on the oscillators down below, we're seeing that there's got this sort of continuation of the trend, with the ADX sloping down the way, but not really even managing to come below 30. As we're looking at this area, drop-offs below this area could then therefore see this then recapture some of its previous gusto and moving towards the top side. You could this just expanded just as we're talking. You could look towards this and say there's some sort of premature bullish divergence on the go, with this low being slightly lower than this area just here. But that is of course very much premature to say so. Likewise over here on the RSI, it would be premature to say so, having not really got in a local top. So what you can actually do is start to dismiss this should we go back above the neckline of this head and shoulders over there, and that may be good enough in terms of just looking at this thing for now. And I hope you've enjoyed the episode. So if you have, then please hit that button to like and subscribe. Like I say, I have a target of 2,000 subscribers over the next couple of weeks, and check out the Bitcoin video and share the Bitcoin video as well with your friends, because I'll be doing a Satoshi giveaway, I think, on September, and giving away a number of Satoshis depending on how many views the channel gets. So of course it's in everybody's interest who's entering that competition, which is you just enter it by saying Rocky, you rock on a Bitcoin video and sharing that with your friends, being subscribed to the channel. You'll have to have your subscriber things public for me to know that you're subscribed to the channel, of course, as well, just so you know. If you want to win it, that is, or else, you know, join the Discord and chat, in which case I'll know you're subscribed anyway. And yeah, great. Wouldn't that be great? So if you can share this with your friends, that'd be excellent. And I really do appreciate you joining in today for the show. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you've got some value to take away. And if you like Run DMC versus Jam Master J, then you should maybe check out that Bitcoin episode and watch the whole thing. And if you don't like having songs that are poetic in their nature, I suppose, from a modern viewpoint, anthropologically speaking, struggled through that eventually, then you can skip it. But if you do, then you'll still watch the whole thing and enjoy the Bitcoin episode. I do recommend it. There will have been a card showing up during this episode up above my head, or actually up above at the top of the screen, to suggest watching that. You can click the button, see the cards. Maybe it's over on the right, maybe it's on the channel, maybe it's down below somewhere, whatever. You find it. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Join the Discord too if you want to chat with people who are just like you. A friend of yours is a friend of mine. Suggest me and I'll suggest you back. Thanks so much. See ya.